We've got a very special guest on the Celtic View podcast this week. We've got a man that was a league winner at Celtic, also a man that was part of the team that helped us get to that UEFA Cup final in 2003. Very well known for having a wand of a left peg as well, now over in Nashville in America. It's a very warm welcome to Steve Guppy. Steve, how are you? And thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you. That was a very nice intro. It's been a while since I've had an intro like that, so that was cool.
Always got the warmest of welcomes when you come in the Celtic View podcast, of course. I mentioned there, Steve, that you're now over in Nashville. I think that's a good place to start, just to let Celtic fans know what it is that you're doing nowadays.
Yes, no, I mean, as a coach now, it's funny, you never know where this game's going to take you. It's funny, the last, 10, 12 years odd, I've found myself working in America and the States for a number of different teams. And 3 years ago, I was invited to come and join the staff at Nashville FC with a new club coming into the MLS. And I have to say, it's gone incredibly well. And here we are, all of a sudden going into our fourth season together. So, it's been a great journey so far.
Very exciting to be part of that early project of a new club. And what's very exciting for us to have you on is it gives us a chance to talk about one Alistair Johnston, who you know all too well. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with Alistair.
Yeah, I mean, Alistair's obviously done incredibly well for himself, and I'm really, really happy for him because he's actually a really nice lad and a good pro, which is, I guess, the most important thing. We drafted him in the college, as they do over here in the US. This college draft thing is fairly important, and of course, because we were a new franchise, we were quite high up in the draft picks. So, there was a lot of research went into looking to get the best players out of college. And in Alistair, we managed to do that. So that was pretty cool. But just to talk about him, there was a lad who came in, and often these college players take a little bit of while to adapt. It's a big jump up, obviously, from college to MLS. But, he had a bit of luck on his side where the couple of right backs who were more senior than him, fell out of favour or injuries for a number of different reasons. And he got put in the firing line, as it were. And he took to it incredibly well. Very quick learner, very hardworking. And the thing with Alistair, I guess, where me and him really, got together on really was that he was someone who's got really, he's a very solid defender. I'm sure you've seen that, and smells danger, and he's a very good 1v1 defender, and also just a good all-round fit, can play centre half, right back, wing back. So he's very good at that. But moving forward, we wanted to try and help him create a bit of a weapon, and his right foot crosses, was something that he really took to very, very quickly. And I'm hoping, I've not seen much footage at Celtic, but I'm hoping that he's really showing that his right foot crossing ability is actually very good. And so that gave him that weapon where, a lot of players, it makes him stand out from others. And, I think that's what got him into the Canadian national team. On his debut or second game, he put in a great cross to the far post for the forward to score, and I think that really helped him claim his place in that Canadian squad. So that really has been, a little intro of what it was when Alistair first came, that he did well, took his chance, but then really got to work on trying to get better and make this weapon of a crossing more effective.
Yeah, we were speaking actually not long after a recent match the first team had, which was a victory away to Hearts, where we got a chance to see that, where Alistair Johnston puts a ball in from the right and Kyogo, our striker, nips in with a little back heel to flick it into the back of the net. So clearly that worked back then is working now. But Steve, I'm interested in what you saw in Alistair then in those early days in the college system to make you as a coaching staff go, this is a guy we want to pick in the draft, because you have so many options of players to choose from?
Yeah, well, I'd love to take the credit for that, but sadly I can't, because I was over in England when they were deciding on who the college draft were. So, you know, that goes to Mike Jacobs, our general manager, and Gary Smith, of course, who is the head coach. So, you know, they will be the ones who were more behind, you know, the recruitment of Alistair. But once he arrived here, you know, that's really where, you know, mine and Alistair's story really kicks off. I mean, I you know, this whole thing of crossing, you know, is something I don't think people work on enough. You know, the little details that make all the difference. You know, you know, to give you an example, I guess many years ago when I was at Wycombe Wanderers and as a non-league player, you know, we obviously, Martin O'Neill got the job, and obviously he came with him was John Robertson and Steve Walford. You know, John Robertson and you know, was one of the greatest wingers we've seen in England, and well, you know, and obviously Scotland as well. And of course Steve Walford was an excellent fullback in his own right as well. And it all happened in a quite, two sounds like I'm washed up and really old, but I'd actually not had much professional football. Well, I'd had 10 years, I guess. But if you think about it, players who come through a system, you know, an apprenticeship at a football club, I had none of that. I came off a building site at 20 years old, you know, so, you know, I felt I still had plenty left in the tank, is what I'm trying to say. But of course, then you know, you've had 5 years, or I'd had 5 years playing in the Premiership. Obviously played for England, so there's been a progression, and I've been working, you know, in a really tough environment, which was, it was amazing to know that I could you know, handle that sort of standard. But yeah, Champions League was, you know, I'd had a little example of it in the UEFA with Leicester when we got into Europe, having won the, you know, the Carling Cup, as it was called then, the League Cup. So I'd had a little, you know, glimpse of what it was like, but the Champions League definitely was a next level up. It was an incredible standard. So, you know, that was a very, very exciting experience to sample and to have played in it. So yeah, and obviously to do it, you know, those nights at Celtic Park in front of 60-odd thousand, you know, you wouldn't hear the noise of it all. You could hardly hear yourself think. You know, they were the things that I spoke to Alistair about when he signed. I was like, you know, get ready for an Old Firm game. You nothing will prepare you for what's coming up. So that's pretty cool that he's experienced that. And yeah, it was an amazing experience. I look back on now and go, wow, you know, I'm really, really proud that I've, you know, managed to play in the Champions League for a team like Celtic.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about any particular memories you had from that campaign, because we played Juventus, Porto and Rosenborg in the group. Before that though, I don't know if you have any memories of the first game, I think it was, when we went away to Juventus and we lost from a couple of dodgy decisions. And I can remember Martin O'Neill after the match in his post-match press conference, and he was not a happy man. I'm sure you've seen Martin in a lot of those instances where he comes into the dressing room and wasn't best pleased, maybe during your time at Celtic and Leicester and Wycombe. I don't know if you have any memories of times with Martin and maybe that game and the Champions League campaign in a whole.
Oh, I've got plenty. I mean, I do remember that game, and we've got a lad training with us at the moment who's from Slovakia, would you believe? And he was talking about Lubo. You know, and it was incredible to talk to him about it, because he asked me about him, and I was like, wow, because what a great player he was. But he's almost like a secret where people don't know who he is. If you're not a Celtic fan, most people don't know him. Yet he's one of the best players I've ever played with. So we were talking about him only yesterday at training, and this whole Juventus game came up, funny enough, because obviously they since got into some trouble for a number of different reasons. You always wonder, without being too controversial, you always think, wow, you know, were we involved in that somehow? But probably not. But no, I do remember that the manager was very unhappy after that game. But yeah, I think, well, you understandably so, to go to Turin and you know and match them and nearly get a result, which would have, it's always, that was the issue with the home games were fantastic. The away games, just trying to get over the line there to get enough points to qualify in very, very tough groups was probably our undoing, I guess.
Yeah, those home games though, you mentioned about the atmosphere at Celtic Park, and obviously for yourself, you'd been playing in the top level in England in the Premier League. You'd played for England as well, and of course, with the Celtic badge on at the moment, we're a bit biased here, and we say we've got one of the best atmospheres in Europe, if not the world. As a player, can you try and explain what it was like, and is it up there with amongst the best?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a long time ago now, but it was, I think, obviously in England, playing in a cup final at Wembley was something that you dreamed of as a kid. You know, walking up. I'm sure it's different for people who like the cup final in Hampden and what have you, but at Wembley, when I was a kid growing up, you always wanted to walk out the tunnel and see the fans, and it was, you know, to get to do that, it was one of those moments in life. It was every bit as good as you'd hoped it would be. And then moving to Celtic, I guess, you know, later on in my career, was then the energy and the intensity of the crowd was something to behold. You know, I think in most crowds, there's always a section of people who sing and all the rest of it. But it seemed at Celtic, everyone was singing, which obviously made the whole stadium, you know, buzz rather than just sections of it. So that was something, an experience. And of course, Champions League with that extra bit of spice, an evening game, which always gives you that extra bit of atmosphere with the floodlights and, you know, the way obviously dark and just great. Evening games are always the best games to play as a player. I always think that. I'm sure everyone does. So yes, it was, you know, an incredible experience. And those games, of course, you need to win, you know. So those European nights were just you know, they're it's funny when you retire, right? You meet up with players. You very rarely talk about games, you know, or performances. You tend to talk about nights out. Well, me and John do anyway. But you know, Celtic, I guess, would be one of those rare occasions where if you talk to ex-teammates, you know, you will mention the odd game because of just the experience of the whole occasion and how everyone felt after wins. I will say, I mean, when I coached with Martin O'Neill with Ireland a few years ago, that was very similar. You know, in the intensity of it. Obviously, you're representing a country which felt, you know, an honour. I have to say, it felt an honour, and we did well in the Euros. And I remember one night we beat Italy to qualify for the next round of the Euros in 2016, which was a moment I'll never forget. And that was the difference. I remember going in the dressing room. I know we're going a little bit off topic here, but it's similar in talking about crowds and that. And you know, the Celtic crowd and the Irish crowd, there's a lot of synergy there, I guess. And you could really feel the comparisons. But I remember being in the dressing room after that game when we beat Italy, and most of the players were crying. And I've never seen that before. You know, normally there's a lot of players, everyone's ecstatic and buzzing and you know, the rushes that you only get as a player when you win a big game. But to see that with these Irish boys all crying just showed how much it meant to them. So yeah, you know, the crowd definitely had a massive impact on all those.
There's be plenty of people listening, Steve, who have plenty of Irish connections, so I'm sure they'll be happy to hear your stories about that as well. Just take us back into the dressing room at Celtic at that time. You mentioned some of the big hitters that were in that squad. You mentioned Paul Lambert and what the dressing room was like. You mentioned Lubo Marachuk, what a player he was. Henrik Larsson, of course, the king of kings. I just want to get your memories and tales on what that squad was like, how it managed to be such a strong group together, and is there any wee kind of nuggets of stories you remember about particular players as well?
Well, I think one of Martin O'Neill's great strengths that seem to have been forgotten as he's, I'm always amazed that he's not in work at the moment, is that he was such a strong character that he didn't shy away from signing players with a similar reputation. And I think he did it at Leicester, where when you get these players with the, this sort of character where they're not always easy to control, they got their own minds, but that sometimes can help you in the big moments where they're not shrinking violets, we say. Where you look at Leicester City, Matty Elliott, there was Jerry Taggart, Neil Lennon, Ian Marshall. There was a nucleus of players there who were absolutely fantastic for Leicester City, but they were strong characters. And then you obviously then go to Celtic, and a similar thing there. I remember watching when we signed Bobo Balde, and watching him attack the ball from goal kicks. And thinking about, if you were a centre forward and he was come flying and all he saw was the ball, he did not see anything, and he'd be flying at it. And if you were unfortunate enough to be in the way of it, you'd make sure it didn't happen again. And that was, that it almost became a legend, and I'm quite sure there was many centre forwards who played against Celtic who didn't look forward to it, for that reason alone. And I think that's important. When you have a look around that pitch of the Celtic team that Martin O'Neill assembled, people like Chris Sutton, John Hartson, Henrik Larsson, they're all, people who have got their own mind, they've got their own ideas. And Martin O'Neill was such a strong personality himself that he was not only controlled it, but he, they all, completely listened to him and fell into line. Absolutely. Wholeheartedly, and I think that was part of the reason why it was such a great squad and achieved so much.
I wanted to ask you about Henrik, but because you mentioned Bobo, I feel like everyone that I've interviewed that played alongside him has a story about either being on the wrong side of him or watching someone else get on the wrong side of him. Do you have any Bobo stories?
Do you know what? I've got this, Bobo, honestly. And I'm blaming the admin at the club, Celtic club, for this. It was a long time ago, so I'm sure they don't work there anymore. But there was an end-of-year award ceremony, and it was a players' play, and it was going to be at this big event, and it was obviously packed out with Celtic fans, thousands of people in there, big event, and it was going to be for the Player of the Year. And it just came down. I'd had an operation in Germany. So I was in Munich and I came back late. So it turned out I had the last vote. And I didn't know, unbeknown to me, that Henrik Larsson and Bobo were neck and neck. So it came down, actually, I had the casting vote to decide who won Player of the Year, which is wrong. Okay, but I'm just trying to remember. I think, so the reason I was upset with the club, because if I was told, I think Henrik had some, I don't know, let's say 10 votes. I can't remember how many votes he had, but he was one ahead of Bobo. So if I'd have been told that, I'd have voted for Bobo and they could have shared it, and because they were both, Bobo had such an amazing season, but Henrik's Henrik, right? And I voted for Henrik because being a forward-thinking player, my rationale was it's harder to create than it is to stop. So although they both had fabulous seasons, Henrik's has had a harder season because he's had to create. But I would do, being a forward-thinking player. So I voted for Henrik. And then they asked me to actually give the award. It's great. It's never good as a player when you're not in contention to win it yourself, but you're asked to hand out the reward. Great. So I had to go up on stage, and that's when they announced the scoring system. And it was almost like, and I was like ready to, and the make matters worse, everyone was convinced Bobo had won it. So I'm up walking out on stage and all the fans are singing the Bobo Balde song they used to sing. They were all convinced he'd won it. And I knew he hadn't. And I knew he hadn't won it because of me. And then when they announced the scoring system and the woman who, I can't remember her name, but she announced how it all went down. I had the last vote and it was she really threw me under the bus, as to be said. So I had to announce against everyone's surprise that Henrik had actually won it, and I think it's quite a funny story, I guess. But honestly, afterwards, I went to Bobo and said, "I'm really sorry. If I'd have known," and he was good as gold. He was like, "Don't worry, Henrik deserves it. Well done," and he never held it against me. I mean, how classy is that?
That's probably a good thing for you, because I thought you were going to go with that story and say the next time in training I got Bobo 6 studs.
Well, he used to do that anyway. I mean, but he, I'm sure he didn't do it with any intention afterwards. So no, I really liked him. He was a great guy. He was actually a different person off the pitch than he was on. And I don't have no idea what he's doing these days, but I hope he's doing well.
Yeah, it's someone we need to try and actually get in the podcast. So that's a good idea that you've given me there. Just closing off.
Don't remind him of that story. That's all.
Or else he will come back.
Just in case he's changed his mind.
Just one other match in that that first season, I wanted to mention. It was the day that we actually won the league title. It was a 5-1 win against Livingston, which I watched back the highlights of earlier today in preparation for this interview, and you put in a couple of crosses, you got a couple of assists for the goals that clinched the title as well. I don't know if you have any memories of that occasion of winning a league title. I imagine that must have been your first league title as a player.
We won the Vauxhall Conference with Wycombe, so listen, it felt great at the time at Wycombe, don't get me wrong, but when you're trying to make comparisons to the Scottish Premiership, it does sound a little bit demeaning, but yes, I guess after Wycombe to win a league title with Celtic was I know it's expected. You've got to do well. It's either us or Rangers, and it has to be said, Rangers had a very, very good team at that point for a number of different reasons that we don't need to go into. But it was, I remember the game. I remember actually putting one on a plate for Paul Lambert, which I don't remember him thanking me for. But it was fantastic. It really was. I keep saying fantastic, I guess, but it was, a memory that I'll always cherish. To play in that game that won it, and to play a part in it. When I look back on my career at Celtic, I didn't play as many games as I'd like to have done, and but there were some real highlights, and obviously that was one of them. I think one of the best games I played for Celtic was against maybe, was it Basel, the Swiss in the Champions League, or Celta Vigo on our run to the UEFA Cup. They're the games where I look back and go, okay, to play well in Champions League or in Europe, that's great. If I count them, and being completely honest. There were times when I obviously didn't play well enough, but those games, to be able to play and say to myself, I did well in that Champions League in UEFA Cup, that means something in my career, I guess. But of course, to play in the game that wins, I know we were well ahead at that point, but just to win, to play in that final game, set a couple of goals up, it really, really felt part of it, and it was an excellent little moment in everyone's career, and I'm no different.
Of course, it definitely should be. Let's get into that second season then, where you mentioned a couple of those games, the Basel game and the Celta Vigo. So the season starts off, I think you're playing pretty much week in, week out. We're a team that have just been in the Champions League and won 3 games, and then we have the shock of going out against Basel in the last qualifying round, so we don't make the group stages. But unbeknown to everybody, that starts off this incredible run to Seville, which you more than played your part in. You talked about Celta Vigo, there was Blackburn before that. You played in the game against Liverpool as well. Just a kind of overarching question really about what your memories are of that campaign, and again, any little kind of nuggets of stories that you might remember from it.
Yeah, To have a run in Europe the way it did was exciting for everyone. Of course, the league's a battle, and you have to grind out performances week in, week out. But the European adventure I guess was especially special for someone like Martin O'Neill, who'd won it with Forest and back in the day. So I think it was something that was always very close to his heart. And of course, everyone was excited about the European games. So yeah, so the Basel game, yeah, to go out to them. Listen, they were still Swiss champions. They're still pretty good, but you know that was a little bit unlucky, really. I remember, you know, playing in the home leg, then coming on sub in the second leg, and we created some chances, but just, you know, it didn't happen. So yeah, so then obviously fell into the UEFA Cup, and like you say, the journey was so memorable because obviously we played a couple of English teams. We had obviously Blackburn, who were flying high there. I remember, you know, the home game against Blackburn, they were pretty good. And you know, I think going down to Ewood Park, you know, maybe people were thinking that we'd come unstuck, but it was such a great performance that night, and you know, we fully deserved to go through. And of course, was it Liverpool next? Am I right in thinking that? So there again, it caused so much you know, interest with playing obviously one of the biggest teams in England against Celtic. It was I remember that, but that was a very, very special encounter, and to win it down in Anfield in the manner that we did was just, you know, testament to what a good team, what good team it was. I think people always say, you know, back then, I remember there was talk that if Celtic and Rangers ever joined the Premiership, where would we be? Where would the team, you know, stack up in that you know, in that league? And honestly, I think that Celtic team that from that era would have been contesting for Champions League football. I really do think that.
Yeah, it was such a strong team, and in any given night in Europe, we were a match for anybody. We proved that over the years that you were there, and the rest of the time under Martin O'Neill as well. Just to kind of go into a bit more detail into a couple of the games, you mentioned the Blackburn one and the home leg, in which that we came away with the result, but there were some comments afterwards about our performance compared to Blackburn's performance from the Blackburn manager at that time. Can you remember at all, before that match at Ewood Park, if that was used as motivation, if bits of newspapers were maybe put up in the changing room?
Honestly, I don't remember, but I don't think anyone really needed that sort of inspiration. I'm pretty sure Martin O'Neill would have absolutely got the players revved up, because he always did. It was just an incredible talent at doing that. But I think more than anything, it was a cup competition, playing down in England. We wanted to show that we were more than capable of living with teams from down there, and you know, and thankfully that night we showed it.
In the game at Anfield then against Liverpool, we get a 2-0 victory, goals from Alan Thompson and John Hartson. I'm interested though in what Martin O'Neill's like before and during those big matches in Europe, where you're going to Anfield, we're really not expected to get a result. What did he do prior to moments like that to really try and make sure that as a group we believed that we could go into those games and win? Or was it the belief already there?
Well, I think it's something that there's a process that goes on from the moment you sign. You know, it's just the way he is. Everything matters. You know, even in training, quite often the training sessions that we did, as I spoke earlier about how intense it was and how, you know, incredibly competitive the games were, but a lot of that was down to him. You know, there'd always be something on it. You know, the loser would have to do some sort of forfeit, some sort of run in, and because he was, you know, the character that he was, so strong that, you know, not every manager can get away with that. You know, a lot of players would, you know, because it could get quite heated, and you need that little bit of extra intensity. You know, and it's funny, years later, working with Ireland again, you know, working with someone like Roy Keane. And you start to tap into his experiences at you know, Man United and everything they achieved, and you think, wow, there's a lot of similarities here. It's not rocket science; it's just getting the best out of the players. And that's what he had a knack of doing. So it wasn't one moment. Of course, I'm sure going into these games, the way he spoke, and he wasn't, so much a rant and a raver before before matches. I think I played for managers who are ranting and raving, and it kind of washes over you after a while. It loses its impact. There'd be sometimes we go out and it'd be very calm, calculated and articulate and everything he spoke about. But there was a steely intensity about his words. Of course, if we came in half time, it wasn't going to plan, then we'd get a different side of him. But it was really, really interesting. I didn't really think too much of it as a player. But then when I became a coach and obviously got to work with him far closely and saw his methods, watching the way he spoke to players and how he got the best out of them before games was incredible. And I've never seen anyone quite like him or work with a manager capable of doing that. And I think I'm pretty confident that most players you will speak to on these podcasts who played for him will say exactly the same. Yeah,
obviously the team then go on to get Boavista in the semi-final. We win that. We then get to the final as well. But for yourself, from what I was reading, you had a hernia operation towards the end of that season and missed that kind of crucial part at the end. And it's a really strange season when you look back on it in general, because we have this amazing run to UEFA Cup final, but we come away at the end of it and we don't win a single trophy. I mean, it must have been a real strange campaign as well for yourself personally to end it in the way that you did through injury, and also collectively that we didn't actually manage to win anything for how strong we were.
No, it was. I mean, I think I look back. I mean, at the time, obviously, it was depressing not to be involved. I was obviously there, and so seeing around it. The semi-final I missed as well because of the injury. But I look back now and go, do you know what? I actually went through pretty much my whole Leicester career. I think I had 2 knee operations towards the end, but essentially, I think I held the record in the Premiership for a little while where I played every minute of every game for like a year and a half. So what I'm trying to say is I was really fortunate with injuries, really fortunate. I didn't really hamstring, groin, calf, thigh. I never pulled a muscle in my whole career, not really, until I guess, then the latter end of my Celtic career, I then started to pick up these little injuries and obviously really untimely to not be involved in such big games, of course. But I guess if you look over my whole of my career, I shouldn't complain too much.
Yeah, and then that summer, Steve, the summer of 2003, you end up leaving the club at that point, but you certainly kind of played your part in some very big moments during your time at Celtic over your couple of years that you were there, and had some big moments and some big games that we can all look back on. I just wanted to finish off on, Steve, what we usually do when we have a guest on is ask some kind of quick fire questions about your own time at the club and also about some of your teammates as well, if you're keen for doing that. But first of all, just in that time when you then leave and you kind of reflect now on your time at Celtic, how do you look back on your time as a Celtic player?
I look back now very rarely, if I'm being honest. I'm so into coaching, especially position-specific coaching. We spoke about the crossing, but I love working with players on the 1v1s, and that fills up my day. But on the odd occasion, I think back. Obviously, it's nice to be able to say to people that you played for Celtic. That's especially out here in America. Everyone knows the club. Even with people who are not massively into soccer, they know Celtic. So that there's a certain amount of pride, I guess, when you look back and go, yeah, I played in a very, very good team. Didn't play as much as I'd like to have done, but when I did play, I think I managed to get some crosses in and set some goals up for some great forwards. Let's be honest. You've got Chris Sutton, John Hartson, and Henrik Larsson in the box. If it's a bad cross, then you're doing something very wrong. So I look back on those periods and think it was an honour to play for such a big club and to play with such great players.
Amazing, Steve. That's brilliant. Now let's just finish off then and some of these quick fire questions then to find out a little bit more about your time at Celtic with some of those teammates. So the first one I've got up here is, who is the best player you played alongside at Celtic?
Well, it would have to say it would either be Lubo or Henrik. It'd be very difficult to not say Henrik with seeing I voted for him for Player of the Year, of course, but I mean, world-class striker, and to be around a world-class striker, to watch how he behaves. He was the one who first started doing ice baths. One of the first players I ever saw do ice baths. Now everyone does them nowadays, of course. And so to watch him in training, he used to get me to cross for him after training, and it'd be just him in the middle, and I'd have to whip in these crosses. And if I ever got one wrong, it was the end of the world, and he demanded so much, which I look back now and go, wow, that's incredible. There's no mistaking why he was so world class. But of course, Lubo was just an absolute magician as well.
Yeah, that's two very, very good shouts, Steve. Next one, who was the biggest joker or prankster in the changing room? Can you remember anything at all?
Well, I know still in Petrov always wanted to be funny, but his jokes just weren't. So I can't add Stillian. I mean, pains me to say it, but Chris Sutton was a very dry sense of humour. Someone who said he'd never get involved in the media has clearly changed his mind in that respect. But there's someone who's very, very dry sense of humour. No, I think that the whole dressing room as a whole was quite fierce, that dressing room. There was a lot of banter going around, and sometimes you didn't always enjoy it. But I'll tell you who was funny, Jonathan Gould. Gouldy was funny. He was hilarious.
Brilliant, that's great. I may know the answer to this already because we may have already spoken about him, but who would have been the one player in that team that you would not have wanted to cross?
Oh, Christ. Yeah. I mean, he was a really nice guy, but of course everyone would look at that and the way he was on the pitch and the way he was sometimes in training. He certainly was a fierce competitor. So why not? Let's go with him.
I mean, I loved your Bobo stories. Did you have, maybe not necessarily specifically of him, but is there anything else you can remember that's a real kind of tale that's you always maybe tell at a dinner party or something at your time at Celtic?
Well, difficult. I mean, there was so many. There was a lot crammed in those 2.5 years there of incredible stories. And some of them are not mine, so I'm not sure it's right for me to share. It'd be someone else's story. But I do remember that I used to room with Sean Maloney. And Sean was a young player. I think they put him with me to try and have maybe a senior pro and offer some advice. And I have to say, we got on really well, me and Sean. And even though he was very young, it was soon a battle for dominance in that room in the evenings. Like, he wanted to go to bed at 9:30 and turn the light off, and I wanted to stay up and read for a little while. And it was always a constant battle where the light would be off, I'd turn it back on, then he'd turn it off, and that tended to be how mine and his relationships went. We were like a couple of brothers in many ways. We'd be constantly arguing, constantly fighting, but also great friends as well. And So I was obviously pleased to see how well Sean's career went, and I feel for him a bit because I actually think he was very, very talented, and I know he still had a good career and did great things, but injuries were always something that seemed to hold him back from really fulfilling his talent. So not a great end of party story, whatever it was, but that was one thing that came to mind that I thought I'd like to mention.
Yeah, he was a superb player, Sean Maloney. One of the best, technically, I think we had around that time. A player I grew up absolutely loving. So, always good to hear about him. Just a couple more, Steve. This one about the manager. And I mean, it's great if you have one about a Celtic story, but it could be another one I feel like anytime again I speak to someone that played under him, has a story about maybe the angriest they'd ever seen him or the most irate. Is there anything that comes to mind for you at all about Martin?
Well, I mean, I get this banded around at me a little bit. I was always his favourite. I mean, maybe not at Celtic, but at Wycombe and Leicester, that I was always his favourite. And I'm sure, and I said, obviously, I'm forever grateful that someone of his stature saw something in me and got the best out of me, so I was really lucky in that respect. But I have been on the other side of that as well. I do talk to him fairly regularly, but he, he's very, very fierce on occasions. And I remember I did fall foul to. I upset him once when I was at Celtic. And I remember being in his office, and I was like being told I was walking. It was like the Green Mile. I was walking towards his office, and I knew what was coming. And oh my word, I thought he was going to hit me. I'll be honest. That's how it was like. It was incredible. So yeah, but then that's what he was. It was all about winning, and the intensity. It just rubbed off on everyone, and it must have rubbed off on me. Because he dragged the best out of me somehow in all the years I played under him. So, if you were always praised and when you didn't do well, you were sort of let off the hook. It would, when you got praised, it felt like you were being praised. Do you know what I mean? It really felt important. So when someone in the dressing room was getting absolutely battered by the manager, and you're sat next to him. Not only did that player think, I better play better this next half, everyone around him were just thinking, I'm so pleased that wasn't me. I better up my game as well. Do you know what I mean? So you need both sides of the story, both sides of the story, where when he praises you with such intensity and such energy that you just think, wow, that was, I must have done well. So, but then when you get the other side of it, then look out. And I think Roy Keane's very similar, actually. So, there maybe there lies, a bit of another reason why he was so successful in getting the best out of players. But yeah, I certainly was on the wrong side of his temper every now and then. Thankfully, not that often, but once or twice was more than enough.
I can imagine once is definitely more than enough. I could not imagine it at all. Last one, Steve, because you've been so generous with your time. Just again, kind of looking back, is there a certain memory that stands out for you over your time at Celtic, and that can be a personal moment from a game, an atmosphere, anything at all that might stand out more than most?
Do you know what? I thought we were going to be talking about Alistair. I would never had any time to think about this. I mean, there's obviously playing for Celtic. There's plenty of memories when you look back and go, wow, that was pretty special. But I think I'd probably have to go to where I consider, when you at this point, many years have gone by. There's no point making things up. In my heart of hearts, the best games I played for Celtic, I think, was the night against Celta Vigo when we beat them at home. I remember putting in a corner, and Henrik, I'm pretty sure he made this run where he came away from the keeper and jumped and headed it, and not many people could do that, but he had that in the bag, and I knew it. So I had to hit that area, and I managed to do it. And of course he did the hardest thing, which was to score. But, that night I look back and think, I really, really played well that night. And I was really buzzing, and the play under all the pressure and the big crowd, the expectancy, I think, that was pretty cool. And maybe, I guess you covered it, the day we won the league, to play a part in that, and to play well and set a couple of goals up. They're great moments. You don't get enough of them moments in life when you score a goal, you get an assist. They're those great rushes. You don't. As a coach, I guess when you win a game, we won the MLS Cup in 2010 here, and that felt like we achieved something, and you got a little bit of a rush there, but nothing really compares to that of a player, and of course playing such a big club like Celtic and with such a big crowd, when you do something right like that, you know, they're great moments.
Steve, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to the Celtic View podcast. I've absolutely loved going back through and all those memories, and I hope you have as well. And also great to hear some stories about Alistair Johnston, and it's obviously great to see him doing so well here as well. So Steve, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it, and all the best with the rest of your time in Nashville. And I'll say hi to Alistair for you.
Yeah, please do, and look out for his crossing. He works hard in it, so I'm hoping that he's going to set up many goals for Celtic. That would be great.